hit some buttons that make these screens go live and say, "Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Discussing Tabletop." I hope you're having a great day, whether joining us for a pastime or a new time or whatever. Welcome once more. And I really got to fix up this. I keep forgetting to work on the auto adjust on this camera a little bit. It's me knowing the basics of technology and not knowing the details of technology. It's sort of like, I can set up the camera, mess around with things, but the fucking around the auto adjust, I'm like, I guess I can look that up. As it's doing. Anyway, Hot Worm, how is your...
Hi.
I think I asked that before the stream, but I guess you know.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm doing all right.
Hey.
Getting a tooth pulled next week.
I never had that
That's something
problem.
I didn't mention to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you never had a doctor try and pull a tooth, which was then connected to a root of another tooth that he didn't realize because it was too far up on the x-rays he could take. And then in the process cracked your tooth, thus making it unable to be saved, and thus having to be pulled.
Look, I've only had my wisdom teeth out, and then I also had a little bit of surgery because these two front teeth were growing in opposite directions. They wanted to at least go relatively straight.
Yeah,
so
I've had...
to correct that.
Yeah, I had... No, that's interesting, actually. So you actually have had dental surgery, but
Yes.
well, technically also, getting your wisdom teeth moved counts. It's just so routine that it's not, like, a big deal.
Well, I mean, like, it's the thing that, like, I have otherwise had this many cavities in my entire life. 0.
I've had 2 cavities as an adult. But even then, it's like, they're pretty minor. Caught early and just dealt with.
I threw a docket in a chat if you want to check it out, whether you're checking out, of course, live on Twitch or later on whenever you're joining us, you know, there it is, the docket. It's below for YouTube people. You can check it out. I'll provide links to everybody
You really
also.
You really should pin those.
Pin the docket? That's probably not a bad idea. Yeah. I can pin the docket. I keep forgetting that I can do that.
Because here's the thing. Yeah, because here's the thing. You can't actually see it if you join after you post it, unless you pin it.
That's true, and I don't think about this kind of thing because it's sort of like I barely remember to pin things during my other stuff I do. Look, you know, I adapt, but very slowly.
I mean, to be fair, I just thought of it now, and I've been doing this for how long with you, so...
Again, you know, the slow adaptation of technology in existence. I actually think Nevermind, is that the correct one? No, it's not. That's not the correct... I forgot to...
Yeah, you didn't update the docket. Yeah. You did not update the docket.
That was something I forgot. I can do that quickly. Look, you know, I remember things sometimes. What else was to say? Okay. I had a fine week. It was surprisingly busy in different ways. Just because the amount of work I actually had to do on the dungeon for Crimson Queen, which I'm not even done, but I've done a good chunk of it, was kind of crazy. It's both good and bad, and I do actually want to... That's why I thought about...
It's a lot of prep ahead of time, I'm guessing, versus, like, session to session.
Yes. Like, even the other dungeons that we've had, I do have to do some prep ahead of time, but a lot of it isn't as in-depth, because most of the time it's sort of like maybe half a dozen to a dozen monsters, and then one map. You know, most of the dungeons we've had up till now. This is like I've got 5 different layers, and it was like 45 different monsters, I think, at the end, throughout the entire thing. And I cut stuff.
We're all in there, because you don't know where we're going.
And the thing is, I cut out some stuff. I try to leave things that felt thematically like it fit within the story. So I did leave some random ones like that. But there were some other ones that I'm just like, this just seems like unnecessary. And I cut out like 4 or 5 rooms. Even then, that's a lot. With me cutting out, like, I got rid of like the most of the time, there's not going to be like the random encounters because we don't really need them, you know, necessarily. I might use some stuff for them if it really comes up in certain ways. but I don't think it probably will. That's just in case. But yeah, no. It was... that was, like, the first couple of days of my week was working on that, and I've worked on a little bit since then. But that took up a lot of my time this week.
Yeah.
So...
I mean, I get how much prep it can be. I'm kind of doing the same for Pathfinder, and it takes a while.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's the thing that I think is...
And 1E is probably way worse.
Oh. It's the thing that I both like and dislike about these systems like this is that it is better for a visual medium with the way that they have a lot of the setup. And I think it's an advantage of 5e that you don't necessarily have to set up the same way. But again, like, I think 5e, naturally speaking, works better a lot of times for Theater of the Mind. Not that you can't do it for Pathfinder 1e or Pathfinder 2e or any of the other systems, but I feel like...
You can definitely do it for 2e better than 1e, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I can agree on that too. 2e has some systems in place that make it a little easier for that. But like 1e...
abstract.
It's not that it's not difficult to abstract, but it helps a lot with it because there is a lot of the numbers game in it. And I think that's something that I didn't think about until we had the game today. And I think we can talk about it when we get to there, but I have some personal opinions of stuff because it took me a while to process some of the information post-game, because pre-game, when I'm going through all these things and setting everything up, I'm not thinking about it as deeply. And then when I'm off the game and I'm thinking about some of this stuff, I'm like, why the hell am I even worrying about this or doing this kind of stuff?
Oh,
it's
yeah,
just...
that whole thing.
No,
yeah,
it was more than just that. It was so many of the details in this place and some of the stuff like that, and I'm like, this is just so stupid. And especially, the dimensional stuff was so stupid, because I'm like, for a second I thought about it, I'm like, wait a second. I literally had two people set up a base of operations, but it's just traveling 1,000 feet to do something extra? And that just feels like unnecessary work. And I'm like, wow.
It's just unnecessary. Like, I get it. It's like, I mean, part of me was like, why did you even prepare? Why did you even learn those spells if we're going to set up a base camp? This was already made clear to us even before you leveled.
The spell still helps with putting up the base camp. I feel like, the Magnificent Mansion provides you with all the food you need, and it's an extra level security, even at the base camp kind of thing, You're in a hidden dimension, so people don't need to notice you. Granted,
yep. And it provides food for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you have to worry about something moving in while you're not there, but that's kind of like a weird, kind of thing I think about it. But...
Yeah. Oh no, a tiger wandered in. Okay, well, it's dead now. Let's move on.
Some more orcs came in. Man, they're probably not as elite as the group that you just met. I'm not gonna lie. All right, we'll talk.
Someone's eye out as a pigeon or a sparrow.
We will dive into it. Wow. I then managed to pin the wrong message also.
Oh, one other thing. I did the math.
God.
Technically, 12 is the smallest you can call a platoon. The absolute smallest.
I don't know if they necessarily... I can't remember if they had that language there. I think I just called it a platoon or something like that because it felt appropriate to what it was supposed to be. But it's sort of like... I think it's what remains of the once original massive army that they once had. Gates kind of thing,
Yeah, I'm just like, I don't know. Part of me was just like, really? I mean, I don't know. I was just in a mood where
it was sort of like when I took the picture of the art where it shows one thing and I'm like, this is not the description that they give in the book. I'm like,
oh yeah, like
this
the
art
floors.
Yeah, or like with the bridge, and I'm like, this bridge is not as high as it's supposed to be as in the book,
Yeah, well, and then it describes it as a causeway, and it's like, well, okay, what they showed with the picture is a causeway, but what they described is not a causeway; it's a bridge.
Look,
but then they call it a causeway, but then it's not. So
I think it's the thing that I blame that. Yes, this is material that's been technically updated from its original 3.5 to Pathfinder by rewriting it. but the rewrite only rewrote so much. They left most of it there. It's sort of like, mechanically, they made sure it was Pathfinder. Spiritually, they did jack shit, and I recognize that very heavily, like, as I'm going through here. I'm like, God, this is so, like, this especially here was 3.5 coded. And this part here, I realized that afterwards, too. But this is so 3.5 coded, you know, this is a lot of lessons they should have learned by the time.
Yeah, where they just say, yeah, because there was kind of a point, like, even from what I can tell from, like, the 2E stuff, there probably came a point where they're like, this stuff works, this stuff doesn't. And whereas, like, this time it's like, no, here are all the mechanical reasons this doesn't work. And it's like, it has this spell and this spell to prevent these.
It's just, there's also some, like, unnecessary stuff, I think, to it, that I thought about it. Like, you think about it more and you're like, okay, the Unhollow is really cool. And that's a thing that, like, you know, is a normal kind of thing you get with these cursed places. It has rules that's like, yeah, you can't get rid of it as long as the curse is there. You can only suppress it temporarily if you manage to dispel it, which is very difficult. You know, it only suppressed briefly. And that kind of stops channeling a lot, you know, and, okay, you know, we'll get into it. We should talk about the docket first. And,
yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, we'll do that.
Because I did choose for our deeper discussion topic Mega Dungeons, because we've talked about Mega Dungeons, but not focused on them. I actually realized this because we've talked about dungeon crawls, and a dungeon crawl is not a Mega Dungeon. A dungeon crawl can be like 5 rooms. You know, and it can be an adventure that's based around the dungeon crawl, or dungeon crawls, but it's not a mega dungeon. I find in any of my topics that we actually hit up on for a deeper discussion. And anyway, we'll hit that. Anyway, we should get started on the news for the week. And I got a couple of things from Wizards. First off, we did get information on the 10 species that are going to be in the new Player's Handbook. This is the big Player's Handbook stuff we got. I don't know if they talked about it a lot on, like, I don't think they did a YouTube video on it. And they did update a bunch of the species. We are missing a few, but they've changed the rules for that. We know it. 3 have been added, but of course we've also technically removed 2, you know, because they're half species don't exist anymore, you know. Pretty much at all.
Right, because it's Greyhawk, and Greyhawk was before half species.
Greyhawk had half species.
Oh yeah, you're right. Greyhawk did. I was thinking of I always do this. I always think of Mystara when I think of
because we were from Mystara and Joe's game.
Yeah, I know, and that's why I have a lot of Mystara stuff is in my brain.
I think it's a thing that, like, there's a lot of connotations that do exist within half species, but I do feel like the seemingly completely ignoring it that Wizards done, I disagree with. I think, you know, I like the way that, again, Paizo handled it a little bit more of, like, hey, you know,
well, yeah, now you just mix and match.
Now you just mix and match. There you go. You know?
That's your half species. You can have any kind of half species. In fact, there are some things that are only half species.
And, you know, they're ones that have specific names because they're more common, but, you know, they're not, like, you're still just mechanically a mix and match of the other two. And I do think that, you know, you could probably do that for 5e, but I don't know how well it would work because you're balancing out 2 different abilities and it's not as functioning. I don't know. But,
yeah, I mean, because of the way Paizo did it, where, like, they really only ever have, like, one ability, 1 or 2, like, base abilities, and then you basically just pick which version, and then you can just pick feats from both, because the way they have feats and the way you build up your character through the feats, it works just fine.
Yeah. So, yeah. I don't know what we're getting full update overall, but we do, they do have updates to the ones they're mentioning, like Asmar, Dragonborn, Dwarf, Elf, Gnome, Goliath, Halfling, Human, Orc, Tiefling. I think that's all of them that they have. Yeah, they're mentioning the updates to them. Let me just take a quick look here.
I do find it cool. I do find it cool that, like, Orc and Goliath are now core species in this version.
I think, again, you're replacing half orc
Yeah.
Effectively. I mean, honestly speaking, there always has been a lot of negative connotations to half-orc, but it's sort of like it's not necessary that exists. I think that's the thing is, like, you can choose to be... I think that was always the thing. You could be a half-orc that is born out of something more traumatic, or you could be one that's born out of genuine emotions and stuff like that, or maybe even just, like, whether that's love or, just lust, It doesn't have to have a negative connotation at all. It's just the fact that there was that there sometimes with how, unfortunately, especially orcs, how they've been displayed in a lot of these fantasy games, that exists there. And
I mean, that's a thing. To be fair, though, like, I mean, I guess something... So I'm down with the idea of getting rid of that out of their... Like, not getting rid of it, but I should say ignoring it for the main book or main setting. Because there are people who have issues with that kind of stuff. But I don't think it should be gotten rid of entirely.
I think it's one of those things that it's...
I mean, it's funny because the way Paizo handles it, they're really like, here are different types of triggers people might have, and here's what creatures kind of embody this. Don't use them if your players have these triggers.
And also they're like, hey, each individual is from a different thing. If you're coming from these territories where a lot of them are, this might be the way they act because they're from this. And it's sort of like orc culture, really, if you like break it down, is really more, I would call, like, maybe chaotic neutral. It's maybe you could call it that kind of chaotic evil, but it's that kind of weird of like orc culture is really just like the most fit to survive. It doesn't necessarily mean strength, but oftentimes it does, but like they do respect things like, shamans and, and like alchemists and stuff like that are highly respected amongst their culture. And it's an interesting thing to see, like, when you look at somewhere like the Hold of Belkazin, they're very violent, and they might do some awful things, and, they might, like, capture people and enslave them or something like that if you're in that area, you've been taken alive. But they don't feel like evil monsters, I think is the thing. They just feel like a culture that is very alien to the general culture, and honestly speaking, if you know their history, you can understand why, kind of thing like that. It's when I dove into it, it was very interesting. It's a in-depth story, but basically their cultural and technological... Okay. They were cave beings down living with the dwarfs, and basically the expansion of the dwarfs ran into them, and battle with the dwarfs basically moved them up from, like, cave people level of technology to medieval in a couple of generations. And that shock never wore off. They might not have been cave people. They might have been like, basically like Homo habilis or Homo erectus. Those like ones that maybe had rudimentary language but weren't fully there yet. That's the kind of thing that happened to the orc people.
Yeah. I mean, but like Paizo, like the way Paizo does it is they still put the stuff in the thing. Like the monster manual has like a whole section on content warning. It's like they still put them in, but they say, gore, demon, gigalith, knuckleave, zombie, suicide, demon, torture, bugbear, flesh warp, body horror and experimentation, flesh warp, some other things, animal cruelty, goblins and goblin dogs, and so it's just like, if your players or you have problems with these, don't use these monsters, because that's kind of what they do in this setting.
It's the thing that, like, you have to recognize that it's not all of them, and certainly speaking, when given a chance, time, and, reasonable, like, people, they can a group can uplift themselves beyond savagery, they might not get to that level of, like, civilization of some of those human nations that you would call civilization, but they can at least get to an area where they're, you know, not just trying to murder everybody. You know, it's just an interesting thing, and, you know, there's a can of worms we just kind of wandered into here.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm just kind of like, as far as the races go, I don't think that's why they like shied away from it. I think they just shied away from the half races because, I mean, they're still a thing. That's the thing. They're still a thing. It's just that they're not putting any half races in the core this time.
Well, I think the way I think it's the way they said it is like you can still do it if you want, if you're just one or the other. I think it's the thing that they just kind of like. It feels hand wavy of if you want to do it, you can have it. We're just not going to talk about it anymore. So it's less that like they don't want to like remove the ideas of them. They're just ignoring it completely. I think that's the thing. They don't address it at all, really.
I'm trying to see.
Well, they might. Actually, that's the thing. That's the way it seems like. If they do some kind of address in the player's handbook about this kind of thing, I will give a thumbs up. If they address it at all. I'm hoping that they might, but, you know... They don't mention anything in the article here. And... Okay, it looks like when they talked about species, there's feats backgrounds of species was a video. So if you want to check that out,
Yeah. Yeah, actually, it's funny because all the comments are like, so what happened to the half races?
Well, yeah. So, they don't mention it at all. You know. And again, if they just want to keep it simple but mention it, I wouldn't be too bad if they at least said something about it. But it does feel like they're just hand-waving a lot of that stuff there.
I honestly don't get that vibe. I just think they just wanted to focus on, like, these main races. Or ancestry. What do they call them? Species. They're calling them species now.
And again, that's not necessarily bad. But if you think about it, like, for the last 25 years, I'm going to say half-elf and half-orc were core species.
Yeah, they always have been.
Half-elf even earlier than that. I think half-orc existed in like second edition AD&D, but it wasn't as big as it was in third edition. You know.
Yeah.
But half-elf has been around for a very long time. So, I don't know.
Yep.
I'm looking at the abilities. They seem fine. You know. Again, it's just like I don't know enough about Goliath to compare them. Halflings and gnomes and dwarfs being everybody being base speed 30.
Oh wow, they have the speed, which is neat.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Goliath.
You know, I gotta be honest. Like, I understand logically having it less speed, but just having it the same for everybody.
Oh, they also now have a giant. Goliaths now have a giant ancestry. They used to just be Goliath.
Yeah, I think that's the idea.
No, they changed a lot. They changed a lot.
Yeah, I think the Goliaths are supposed to be like, well, giant blooded or something. You know, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to see.
They're half giant.
They're basically half giant. Well, again, I think that's what they're really technically more supposed to be, is half giants now. Tieflings only have 3 ancestries now. I don't know how that's changed them. They had a whole bunch that were added in like, I think,
Tasha's? Yeah, I mean, yeah, they've definitely had some added in somewhere. I mean, I can look at Tasha's, I have it, but, oh yeah, they upped all the small species up to 30, which is honestly fair.
It's fine, yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Small species actually had a lot of downsides. And most of the upsides were role-playing. So,
I mean, I gotta be honest. I'm not gonna lie about this. 2024 human just is as good as the old human, if not better again. They now automatically get the versatile, so you get origin feat of your choice at character creation. Still get skillful, But now they get resourceful, which is you gain heroic inspiration when you finish a long rest.
Oh, they get an inspiration every time they... What the frick? What? They were
Yeah.
good. They were good enough already. Why'd you have to make them better? Now I'm gonna have a bunch of lame humans in my party.
Exactly. Heroic inspiration, the version of inspiration you buffed for 2024, you're just giving to humans when they finish a long rest. The re-roll a dice roll is really good.
Have free 2 origin feats, which are basically like 80% of a feat instead of just 1.
Yeah, you get your background origin feat, and now you get a human, just versatile origin feat.
Yep. And it's like, yeah, okay.
We gave some tieflings some spells. We made halflings more streamlined, I guess.
Tieflings already had spells.
Apparently, they gained some more of them at like 3rd and 5th level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now they get more as they level, whereas before they got everything at level 1, which made them extremely restrictive and bad and like only good in the early levels. So the fact that they can get more as they level isn't bad. Although I think they did get like darkness as they leveled before.
Interesting.
Dark tiefling.
I'm just checking, like, those are all that's pretty similar. Drow no longer have sunlight sensitivity. Honestly, I'm fine with that.
Oh yeah, when they reach 5th level, they can cast. So they already had it where they could.
They might just move around with like change with spells or something. Okay. Each elf variant now is associated with a pair of spells they get at 3rd and 5th level.
Well, that's because the original. Okay, so the original tiefling, there were I think there was a update in Xanathar's that made them have subspecies, but the original tiefling had no subspecies.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
And they always so they only had like 1.
I'm not gonna lie, streamlining it to 3 might not necessarily be bad, but I would want to see like what. Again, similar to Wizard, what did we lose? What did we gain? I'm going to balance that out before I have an opinion on that. I don't know the subspecies, so I'll just leave it at that. We'll wait and see. Let's see here. High Elf now starts with Prestidigitation, but can change it to a Wizard cantrip when you complete a different one when you get a long rest. Okay. So you can still have whatever you want as a High Elf or a Wizard cantrip. What else get Druidcraft? Okay. You can choose Insight, Perception,
no longer have
or
sunlight
Survival.
sensitivity.
Yeah. So you get it for Keen Senses. You get a choice of which one you're proficient in. Okay, that's not bad. Dwarfs like
They also
halflings
get
as
spells at 3rd and 5th level.
Yeah.
Spells always.
I'm going up from the bottom apparently now because I started at the bottom. Yeah, we were talking about tieflings, so I started at the bottom. Dwarfs stone cutting is now just tremor sense for a little bit of time. That stone cutting sucked, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's fair.
Dragonborn have a better breath attack with what they gave in pit spins, and can either be a cone or a line, and they can get wings once per long rest. I don't know Asmers enough to know what's changed for them.
Trying to think what they do. They still have? Let's see, breath weapon, Fizbin's treasury. No, okay, yeah, actually the dragon flight thing was actually something in Fizbin, so.
Okay.
And you can change between a 15-foot cone and a 3-foot line. I kind of like that because, honestly, that actually has a lot to versatility because there are a lot of times where I'm like, I would have liked the other, in this situation, but I would like. So the fact that you can change it is nice. That's actually really nice. A lot nicer than it sounds.
And the breath weapon can be used as part of an attack action. Has uses equal to your proficiency bonus.
And has uses equal to proficiency bonus, which is so nice.
And scales.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Well, it already scaled.
But yeah, so they took the Fitspin stuff where they're like, hey, we made this like an actual thing a Dragonborn can do, and made them like.
I hope they still get that. Yeah, I hope they still get their resistance.
I don't know. We'll have to see the full things. So these are just pretty much the changes. I assume everything else is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're just trying to make things more effective.
Yeah,
which
they're also trying to make it so you get more things at later levels for some of these, like so like they can still get features, but just at later levels, which has always bothered me. But oh well.
I mean, I'm fine with us being with humans, us being the cockroaches of the fantasy world. We're the cockroaches of the universe anyway.
Honestly,
it's our advantage as a species.
Honestly, I would have loved if they went the cockroach route. I actually plan to like do something like that. Because like for Traveler, I feel like it'd be fun to give humans basically just much harder to die ability.
I mean, it's sort of like I just love that as the more we discover like planets that could be similar to ours, we're just like, hey, wow, it turns out our planet actually kind of sucks for a lot of these types of planets. We are very cockroaches of the universe. Oh, whoops. Man. The more we learn about the universe, the funnier it is.
Yeah, one of my favorite jokes is all like, the reason aliens don't visit us is because we're basically just a place full of horrible, deadly creatures, and it's all and then it's like, wait, so that means, so basically the version of Australia, yes, there's an on Galactic Australia.
Congratulations, we're Galactic Australia. Damn it. Again, like, I think I like ability score adjustments being tied to backgrounds. I'm fine. At this point in time, I'm fine with it. I mean,
again, I think it's fine. I like the way Pathfinder did it better.
I agree.
Where it's all like, this is what they are, but yeah. Or you could do this.
Yeah, I like having the Pathfinder's options where you can, again, like, you get one positive that you have to take, and then you just get some choices of anything else you want, and you don't have to take the negative. Wow,
Yeah, you either get two free positives or 3 positives and a negative, I think is what it is.
Yeah. And, so, again, tied to background's not necessarily a bad idea, and for streamlining it, I'm fine with it. Whatever. I've learned to live with it. I think it's not a... Again, I will agree with you. Not the best way of doing it, but not terrible. It's fine.
Like, I think the versatility is nice because it does make it so you don't have to play a wizard as an elf or to play a rogue as a halfling.
You have to be a dragonborn as a paladin. Yeah, the kind of things that they built into some of those, unfortunately, that really were boiled in there, were just that. And I think because 5e is much more of a slighter numbers game than something like 3.5.
Yeah, those small bonuses
made a difference. Yeah, we're like 3.5. You could get away with those negatives and still have that being your primary because the numbers meant a lot less. Same with Pathfinder First Edition, it meant a lot less, and now it means so much more. Yeah, I can understand it being a problem. All right.
Yeah.
Let's see.
So I think overall it's good, but I don't know. Part of me just wish they still gave suggestions and just said you can do otherwise.
And it looks like they will have information in the book for adapting stuff to some species and backgrounds and stuff like that.
Oh, then that's probably where they're going to go.
For like old species and backgrounds, that they have. They'll give rules for it. I mean, yes, that could be where they're, that could just be like, oh, it counts as an old species that we're not really gonna talk about, like turtles and like some of the other unusual ones, like satyrs and stuff that we added in from all these other books. We're not gonna mention them. You can just reuse them, and update them, or these other backgrounds. This is just some rules for adapting. I think that's good to have.
Yep.
Again,
I agree.
It's fine. The other thing that we have out from Wizards is we do have some information on them going to Gen Con, which I wanted to talk about briefly. I don't want to go too much into it, but we can kind of mention it. We know they're going to be... this will be early copies of the Player's Handbook. The new one.
Oh, so, can I buy the stamps now?
And this
Thing
will
now?
be the stamps will be, I guess, released
You can buy the
as
stamps
of
now.
that. I think you might be able to get them now.
Available on August 1st.
When they're showing them off at Gen Con. So, yes. They'll be released in the same day they're showing off at Gen Con.
I did want to buy those stamps. I don't know why, but I do.
Look, I can understand it, part of me...
I'm not a stamp collector, but just part of me just wants to. I don't know why. Probably because I have to put stamps on a lot of stuff at work, and I'm not saying I do it at work, because I think my boss would hate that, but...
I think it's the thing that, it's why the cross-promotions of some, IPs we like actually works. Not all the time, but to a good degree. Because it's sort of it's the thing we like, so that's why, it's D&D stamps. That's really neat. I kind of want that. It's the same thing as people getting, the Star Trek pizza cutter. It's the Enterprise pizza cutter. It's the exact same thing. I understand.
I actually think I own that. The Star Trek pizza cutter. My sister got it for me for my birthday.
Someone I knew had it. I don't think we ever got it, but I think someone we did have it.
I never opened it because I'm but it's in here. I think I have it somewhere. Yeah. But yeah, no, part of me is if I buy 10 sheets of these stamps, I then have a lifetime of stamps.
Mm-hmm.
Well, until they go up in price, and then I need to put 5.
Yeah, they're gonna have. Well, they might be they do them as the forever stamps now. I think technically they started doing those, so that even if they increase the price, what you bought them at counts.
Yep.
Theoretically, that's what they started doing them at. Because in the last 5 years I have bought stamps.
I think that's still a thing. They're the same stamp. Yeah, because the stamps went up in price, but my boss still had to. But the ones we still use still work. So, no, you're right.
I have had to buy them not for myself, but for help with. I think my mom was doing the Christmas cards a couple years ago. Because she does that every couple of years. She'll decide, this year I want to do Christmas cards. So you go buy some stamps while you're out and about. If you're going to stop by the post office, I'm sure. There's going to be a bunch of panels. I think the big things are, yes, we're going to be seeing the stamps, and they're going to be on sale, and we're going to actually, some people will have their chance to get a hold of the player's handbook. So we actually will start knowing stuff by that time. I'm sure plenty of stuff will pop up online. So by, 1st of August, in basically a couple of weeks, we're going to know everything in the book. Theoretically, or start knowing everything in the book. So... that's coming up.
Cool. Let's say, mine will come whenever, probably September.
So, I saw this on In World, RPG News and Reviews. The only site that's been really functioning as a news site to grab some articles from as of late, which I'm very sad about, but it does some okay articles. Other than going directly to some of these tabletop people's, sites and checking out what they're doing. So, if you were unaware, Cynthia Williams, who was the president of Wizards, had resigned a few months ago, and took, apparently, I didn't know this, she's now the CEO role at Funko. Well, we're getting someone new, John Haidt, who's from the video game industry. So,
he's from Blizzard. Gosh dang it.
I'm not going to say he's not going to do a good job. But hearing his background and that he comes from the video game industry has not filled me with confidence in him. I will wait and give him the benefit of the doubt that he will hopefully be confident, but it's sort of I'm not expecting great things. So if he doesn't do anything great, I won't be disappointed.
Okay, to be fair, Hasbro has mentioned they wanted to start branching out on D&D video games and stuff more.
We haven't seen good signs of that after what they did with Larry.
No, yeah, I know. They fired everyone who worked with them and got rid of everyone who was good.
Burned bridges,
Yeah, it was pretty bad. But so I can see their reasoning. My big sad thing is that it says World of Warcraft and Diablo. I'm which one? Diablo 4?
They said for the last 12 years, so that means he must have just left, meaning Diablo 4.
So I'm just like, yeah. Anyway,
yep.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So again,
he does love D&D and Magic the Gathering. To be fair, okay, I will say there are a lot of people in the video game industry who actually could do a good job in the RPG industry.
Agreed.
In fact,
I'm
Matt
going to
Colville,
who's
a very big name. Oh yeah, who's a very big name.
Yeah.
He, you know who Matt Colville is, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a very big name in the RPG community. He started in the video game industry.
I just this week had a chance finished a video that Momo had given me to watch from Matt's from like 4 months ago, which was your dish is changing.
Yeah. I haven't watched it yet either.
I watched it and I was so surprised because by what has happened, theoretically, what we have would be defined as 5.5 in comparison to the previous times they've done this kind of thing. Now, I walked back from that, but not realizing that the differences between AD&D and AD&D 2nd Edition were as mild as they were, and also defining it a lot more and learning, like, because I didn't really think about it too much, the changes between 3.0 and 3.5 were actually a lot less than I thought, too. So it's sort of like...
So, in a way, these changes are a lot more than those.
Yes! It is more of a 0.5 edition than some of those older ones were. And I'm like...
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Oh! We really are a 0.5, it's just that I thought the 0.5s would be a lot more, and then it's sort of like, actually seeing, like, historically what it was like, oh.
No, maybe I did watch it, because some of the stuff you're talking about I remember, so maybe I did watch it and just forgot.
Yeah, it could have been. I think maybe it's just I didn't realize how mild the AD&D to AD&D 2nd Edition changes were, too, until, like, they were talking about it.
Yeah,
like, oh.
and that's the thing, you talking about that reminded me, I'm like, yeah, I actually do remember Matt Colville, like, a video I watched of Matt Colville talking about that, and it was probably that one. I probably just forgot I watched it.
It was an interesting, definitely an interesting video that if you're, like, wondering about why you might think of this more, like, why a lot of people have thought of 2024 as more of a 0.5 edition, you know? That's why. The people that actually, like, really lived through it and really would recognize it. Like, again, because I did play some of this earlier stuff, but the time I played that, I would not recognize differences between any editions to anything, you know? I playing the black box, which is, like, the actual 1st edition, in comparison to 2nd edition AD&D, is night and day, and that's not a terrible thing for all the sub-editions we had in those early days, you know? I couldn't compare those. So 3.0 to 3.5? You know, I thought that was kind of, you know, there was a lot more changes, and I think it's also, like, that's just me, you know, looking back into time in a better light. Anyway. Let's see here. I opened up the Business Wire. They linked to a Business Wire, article about him, too. So, he helped develop multiple World of Warcraft expansions, Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls, Diablo 3 in consoles.
Okay, not Diablo 4. That's a plus in my book. He also led strategy for Magic the Gathering and Dungeons & Dragons.
So he will lead strategy for both driving global growth in the division and new story from the tabletop and digital experiences. I was reading too fast. Yeah, his role will include oversight of Hasbro's network of gaming studios and digital licensing agreements. So I think that's an interesting thing that they're putting a lot of the digital stuff under Wizards then, technically. Because wouldn't that be separate?
They're planning... Well, okay, so Hasbro does have a separate entertainment industry which used to handle movies and video games. As far as I understand, they're still handling other movies and video games related to other projects. But I think things like... and I think they're also still handling, like, if they do a D&D movie. But I think they're now moving video games under Wizards of the Coast, yeah. That's the vibe I got from stuff. I don't think I've heard anything official about that, but... Yeah, that's the vibe I got, especially because, you know, like with Olirant, it was very much Olirant working directly with Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
For Baldur's Gate 3. So, I mean, Wizards has shown that, I mean, at least they shown before they fired all those people that that they can handle that sort of thing, which honestly doesn't surprise me because there's actually a lot of good stuff. Like, role-playing games actually build a lot of good muscles for story writing, which makes video games good.
Yeah. So
honestly, I feel like there's a lot of mechanics and stuff too that are involved. So it's like it makes sense that there's some crossover. So it doesn't make
again, I think it's the kind of weird situation where he doesn't sound like a bad choice, but because it's sort of like it's the video game industry, plus it's Blizzard, it's that kind of thing that I'm still not really expecting a lot from the guy.
Yeah, to be fair, World of Warcraft and Diablo 3, so it's mainly Diablo 3 he worked on.
Yeah.
That honestly makes me feel a lot better, because he didn't work on Diablo 4, he didn't work on, what's the competitive game? Is it Overwatch they have, or is it something else?
Overwatch is indeed one.
Yes, okay. The whole Overwatch debacle, where they were all like, they banned people for speaking out against China and stuff. Remember that? Yeah, from like competitions, like people weren't allowed to. Yeah, so yeah, because of that, like the fact that they didn't work in that department, or so honestly, the two departments he worked in are at least good. World of Warcraft has been pretty solid, and Diablo 3 was also very, very well received and very good from what I hear, even though I never played it.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of thing that it's not necessarily a bad position to be in, but you kind of have to see, You
really want someone with passion, and I can only hope he has that, but I have no way of knowing.
Yeah, we won't know until we see him more. We can hope he's got a lot of passion and ends up being good for the entire thing. Make some great choices. Hello, Momo.
Oh, hello.
Okay. Shall we talk a little about some information for Starfinder 2nd Edition Playtest? Because we do have some adventures and scenarios. Yeah, I think that's the thing is, I don't think he was I don't know what position he was in, Blizzard, too. So it's sort of like a catch.
Yeah, we did find out that he mostly covered World of Warcraft and Diablo 3, which makes me a lot less...
He served as a senior vice president and general manager of the World of Warcraft franchise at Blizzard.
I'm joining for a second.
Okay.
So I do want to lay some light on this. So the reason why, everyone from Blizzard, specifically the higher ups, and this comes from everyone I know who's worked at Blizzard and several streamers who've worked at Blizzard, they're all really incompetent.
That does not surprise me.
It might be good, might be bad. I don't know. Anyways, I'm here. I'm just gonna stay here. You can deal with it.
Okay. I switched over. It's fine. I was ready for that. I've got the 3-player next to the 2-player, so I can easily adapt. It's a choice. We'll see how it goes.
You want insight into what it was like to work at Blizzard and what Blizzard executives are like? Go follow Pirate Software.
I mean, I just have to think back to the time when Blizzard, as I said earlier, Blizzard banned a bunch of people from their Overwatch tournaments because they spoke out against China.
I just realized.
Right. Yep.
What about? They wouldn't mention it. What about Diablo Mobile?
Yes. Don't you guys have phones?
Yeah, because they mentioned very nice things that he was in, but he had 12 years at Blizzard.
Yeah, no, they're only gonna be very positive, and he was specifically a Warcraft guy, which is fair.
Yeah,
I believe he was some kind of producer, I think.
I
Or
mean,
what was it?
like I
He was
said, they were
director of production.
Yeah. But which sounds like just someone who's a manager, which is never good.
The thing is,
but at least Warcraft, as far as I understand, is the most competent department at Blizzard. It's not saying a lot, but
we'll see.
Yeah, it's really not saying much.
We'll see.
No, Blizzard's a mess, and that discussion's not for this show.
Man,
Yes.
I applied for Blizzard once. I'm glad I didn't get an interview.
I have several friends who work for Blizzard. They have nothing good to say.
There's some adventures and scenarios you can play for Starfinder 2nd Edition playtest. They've had a Cosmic Birthday is their full-length playtest module. Plus, let me just put the other one here. They have a bunch of playtest scenarios. So the playtest scenarios are like a lot looser, just basic information that you kind of can build something off of. They've done that before. But it's a lot more stuff that you can now. They're providing material for actual adventures, you can run if you want to try out playtest stuff. So that's very good. It helps people out because if you're playtesting this stuff, sure, you can make up your own shit, but I'm going to tell you, it's new and experimental rules.
Yep.
That's an extra level,
I do like the tiny Vesk in it too. It's adorable.
True. We do have some very nice stuff there.
Something I love is when you just put things that are in a game like this where it's normally you find things with guns and combat and explosions, and then you put it in just a extremely normal situation. I love that in these kinds of things.
I've always wanted to play Starfinder, so I hope Starfinder 2 is good.
Same. I want to play it too. So
yeah, I enjoyed the little bit of 1E that I did, but I don't really go too into depths with it. So I never had that opportunity. But then by the time I was thinking about doing it, it's like, hey, we're doing 2nd edition. I'm like, well, fuck, now I just have to wait. So, I never saw this. It's before my time. But I do remember they did have reruns on the Sci-Fi Channel, in old 90s Sci-Fi Channel.
Mm-hmm.
Space 1999. They're making a role-playing game based upon it.
I've heard of it.
Oh,
yes.
I love this show. I loved this show when it was on, for reruns.
It is an old, sci-fi from, the original Battlestar Galactica time period.
70s.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's your crew of a moon base alpha with missions of exploration,
Yeah, this is a fun show.
I think that's the thing is, from what I know of it, this is a very fun kind of, setting definitely to have an RPG in, where you're, on a moon base and exploring space and stuff like that. We don't. Let's see here. They do have a bunch of what you did repurchase. They have a bunch of questions and answers. And
some of these FAQs are just. Is an RPG like a board game? No, RPGs are different from a board game.
To be fair, I think that is a valid, a valid thing to have in your FAQ when you're dealing with something like this.
I agree, but it was just kind of funny.
It is a little funny.
I think this is well, the thing is, I linked to this site here where they're showing it off, but apparently it is going to be Modifius. That's the people that are going to be publishing it.
Yeah, the fact that I saw 2 D20s rolling, I'm like, okay, Modifius is going to be doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I expect it will eventually be up on their website. I didn't notice it so far. But it could be on a pre-order that I just didn't find. I didn't dive deep into it, and I already have a link to this page here from whatever else products these people do. I think these do old sci-fi television.
Yes, these are old stuff for old shows, limited run shit.
Yeah,
which is good because I like it when those are kept alive.
Yeah, no, I think it's the one thing that there are some very good classic shows that we can't really see a lot anymore, and I'm not gonna lie, I vaguely remember some reruns, again, on the Sci-Fi Channel of, like, the original Battlestar Galactica. And
I love the original Battlestar Galactica.
the thing is, like, it's outshined by its kind of remake a lot. And, we can't
Lost
forget
media
the original.
Lost media is a huge problem.
Yeah.
Like Babylon 5, which is a pioneer of sci-fi television, unwatchable. It's largely inaccessible because it's just been lost to time.
Yeah, there's also a lot of anime which you can't watch because it's like nobody and what really comes down to is basically in some cases, well, I'd probably say in most cases what it comes down to is people who are sitting on the IP don't want to sell it, don't want to give it, don't want to like make don't want to even make money off of it by giving it to someone like Netflix for a fee. You know, like they get paid for letting people Netflix use it.
If it's like in the case of Babylon 5, a lot of the actual production reels are gone. They were destroyed.
Yeah.
So they just can't air it anymore.
It's the interesting thing.
Like it just was never digitized.
Yeah. I think there might be like DVDs of it that are out, but
they're not
generally
rarer. Yeah.
So it's like it's not that you couldn't find like DVDs of it, but you can never restore it or like fix up what it was. It's sort of like I think it's one of those issues. Like I heard the discussion on this that Next Generation, because it was still on film and there's still a lot of it. That's why they were able to do like those remasters and those Blu-ray things. You can't do that with Deep Space Nine because that was the first time they were pushing to digital.
Mm-hmm.
So they just deleted a lot of the shit related to it. You know, so a lot of like the special effects that you'd want to have access to upgrade, you can't find anymore because they just deleted it all.
There's some, so you still can. It's just a lot of extra work.
Yes, I think that was the thing. Is it was like it's not that you can't. It's just a lot of extra work and a lot of extra money, and you don't have as much demand for it. And since it's so much easier for something like Next Generation, so that's why we got those like fancy Blu-rays of Next Generation because it was easy to do that.
You know, this is again my laptop. I know one of the big problems with Babylon 5 is mastering it for newer resolutions simply doesn't work because of how it was shot and how some of the CGI was done. It just doesn't look correct, even with some of the production reels they have.
I think that's the thing is when you don't have those old reels in the material for it, you can't get the newer resolutions, fix it up and stuff like that. You have to live with the whatever version exists, and it's an unfortunate thing that you can always be the best version of it. You know?
Just give me a Babylon 5 RPG.
There used to be one.
Show was awesome.
I don't know if it was very good. The old, like, I think it was early 2000s had one. But that was like the age where there was a lot. That was like the first resurgence of RPGs, I feel like a lot of. Like during the time of 3.0. But a lot of people did like a lot of random RPGs during that time. I remember.
Yeah, it was back in the day when you could just make a D20 system.
Many of them aren't good. Some of them are.
Oh, a lot of them are bad.
But yeah, so Space 1999. I don't know a lot about it. You can sign up to like pay attention to it. And honestly speaking, it will pop up on MoDiffy's site at some point in time, I'm going to assume. But it's kind of cool that we're getting that. I'm not gonna lie.
I love more deeply unserious RPGs because it's gonna have the 70s science fiction charm to it.
It will. It'll kind of be like. It's going to be campy sci-fi. Like, Star Trek, if you're playing a Star Trek game, you're expecting some kind of, like, overarching narrative and deep story. You're not probably going to necessarily get that too much here, but you're going to get that same kind of sci-fi exploration kind of feeling, you know, which is still good. Alright, two more main topics, and we can talk a little bit about our thing. And that, first off, is we're getting a reprint of another older accessory from Vampire the Masquerade, which was Revelations of the Dark Mother. They did this with the Book of Nod. They're coming out with a new version of this one here. I mean, it's fine. They're like big lore books.
That's fine.
You know, so I don't know if they did a lot of changes to the Book of Nod. I don't think they did.
No, so I think Book of Nod was just a straight reprint.
Yeah, because like, that's fine. So it's just going to be another one of those. These are good because it's bringing in like the deep history of the lore that they're technically not ignoring, but they're actually like putting this core parts of the lore up for a newer audience, and I think that's a great thing. Yeah. Not everybody can find those old books, so.
No, they're very hard to find. If you can, they're usually very expensive.
Exactly. So, good reprint. Good to see that. And finally, for the news stories, so the site Tabletop Mirror has acquired the RPG chat service Rollgate. Now, this is just another one of those, like, consolidation things, but it's, like, one of those smaller things, because, like, I technically have only briefly heard about Tabletop Mirror, but I hadn't heard about Rollgate at all. So it's interesting to see, like, a kind of smaller acquisition kind of merging together some things. I don't know a lot about Tabletop Mirror. I think
Tabletop Mirror is... I don't know if it's a... I don't know if it's like a virtual tabletop or not, but I know it's like a campaign manager.
Yeah, they say it's a campaign manager that allows game masters to create custom SRD-style rule sets for their campaigns to share with their players using plug-and-play options from existing open license contents and adding their own custom concepts. It has lore management, custom timekeeping, map-making, and other management tools. And then Rollgate is a play-by-post style art role-play with integrated options. So I guess it feels like combining those two is the step towards, well, a VTT.
So they basically acquired a text-based role-play thing. Because that's what play-by-post is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
which
that's,
I cannot
fine.
do.
I've done it before. It's fine. I just can't get into it that much.
Yeah, but I have a reading disorder. It takes me like twice
No,
as
that's
long.
fair.
But again, like...
Yeah, so it's just such a pain to, like, read through things.
But wouldn't combining these two things be, like, a step towards something equivalent to a VTT, though?
Kind of.
Or version of one?
It's... Honestly, it feels more like a campaign manager where it's like you get your group together, you can manage your sheets, but then you still have to play elsewhere. That's what it feels like to me.
But I guess you'd be playing now with them with Rollgate, but it would be like kind of
They've had an option to do text RP, I suppose. Which is, like, that's good. I think it's fine.
Yeah, it's a different form of playing. It's not quite as in-depth as something like a Roll20, but it's a different format, definitely. And, you know, interesting about the acquisition and see how that kind of how combining the two of these together, you know, evolves into something interesting and new. So, yeah. And they do have some information that they released basically for, you know, Rollgate users and Tabletop Mirror users about it. And, like, the big thing is Rollgate's app will continue to operate now with bug fixes, more dedicated efforts to improve for the next year. And they plan on moving that data into Tabletop Mirror and basically merging it together eventually.
And there's one more thing that I wanted to mention after this, so when we're done with this, before we go to our thing.
Yeah. I mean, there was the one thing that you put the link for that I was going to mention that I almost forgot about because I forget about everything. And that's
basically, I'm just trying to remind you.
Yeah. There's a Christmas and summer sale on Tabletop RPG, so if anybody wants to
drive through
RPG. Oh my god, my brain just sometimes forgets words.
and you have cool titles like Dragon's Bane, which is we talked about honestly a few weeks ago. It's pretty new. I'm surprised it's on sale. And then you have the Witcher RPG also.
Yeah, just good games to check out.
Those are some that I've seen. I forget what Dungeons and Dragonheim is. That's also on sale.
So maybe it's better that we talk about our week in tabletop before we get into my deeper discussion topic, because I was going to have us talk about Mega Dungeons, and we technically started that in Crimson Queen. And I was talking about it at the beginning of the episode, and I had some thoughts about it. So, did anybody do anything else tabletop related this week? I didn't at all.
Besides doing a bunch of prep work, no.
We did a Monday thing, but I don't know how much of that you were there for.
Oh, God, yeah, the Monday thing. I forgot.
You were kind of AFK'd for a bit of it.
I wasn't doing a lot, you know.
Yeah, I think your stuff is, like, this week is going to come up.
My stuff actually did come up during the week.
Did it? Yeah, you had, like, a weird adventure with a man.
Yeah, it was sort of like just me, like, I'm going to explore the local terrain. It's like, I can read in books all at once, but I'm an adventurer at heart. I'm going to go do some, like, basically discount adventuring in the neighborhood.
My character went and met the ruler of a country and then got roped into an assassination play against him. So, you know, We're gonna kill 2 monarchs in this game, I guess.
Yeah, the guy really didn't sound great. I'm not gonna.
He made his wife into a ghoul. That's pretty not okay.
Yeah. You know, kind of sounds awful. But a very not pleasant person.
Kill my boyfriend's dad.
Kind of is awful. I would not argue with you against that one after hearing that. I was working. I'm like, man, this is kind of terrible. Jesus. I'm not gonna lie to you. If you wanted to, you could probably recruit Perrin. Perrin would be like, you know, this does not sound like it's reformable. Not gonna lie. I'm usually thinking the best of people, but this is pretty bad.
Oh, you think you can reform Goth after he murdered a dude? Just after he killed a guy?
Oh, Goth is kind of hard. We'll work on Goth. You know, we can fix him, maybe. You know, him and his rat people. I mean, look, he was raised by rats.
His rat people are kind of fucked up.
He was raised by intelligent rats, so, you know, it's had an effect on him.
I think the rats are bad for his health. I think we need to get rid of them.
No, I'm not there yet. Maybe along that direction. So, anyway, that was Monday, and then Wednesday we had Crimson Queen. So, I'm not gonna lie, I talked about this when we first started. I spent a lot of time trying to set up everything for Crimson Queen this week. And it ended up being a lot more than I thought it was going to be. I gotta be honest. And it was one of those things is, like, I haven't worked on a actual, like, mega dungeon like this in quite a while. So it definitely was a, holy crap, there's a lot to this.
The sheer amount of mechanics you listed off made me actually, like, disassociate from my body.
And here's the thing is, I kind of went through those. I didn't process because I was going through so many things, and it took until like the discussion about it.
Does work in this?
Does
place?
the manner work? Because it's such a weird interaction. It's like, this is not an uncommon spell. They should have thought of this.
I'm going to tell you, I dived into a discussion, and it goes in 2 different directions because of the goddamn language in the goddamn book.
Yeah,
if they didn't mention one thing, it would be easy, and I could just, you know, because the thing is...
make a decision.
No. Dimensional Anchor, the way it's worded, they only mention certain spells, but they do mention inability to travel extra-dimensional. Then they mention specific spells. So, I went into an entire deep rabbit hole on extra-dimensional things like bags of holding and stuff, which are a very good example of something that could be similar to the mansion, where there generally had been some consensus that would also shut that down while you were there. Okay. Until the book specifically mentions in a way that implies they work.
It's kind of
Fuck
bad.
you, book!
It's like not a, like, I get they're going for a vibe and a certain like tone, but sometimes you just gotta let it ride.
Teleportation
doesn't
work, and plane shifting doesn't work, and kept it simple.
I think that's just what you should do. I'm gonna be real, because like
that's what I'm doing.
There's too much to remember.
I think it was also there's a couple other smaller like rules I was going to keep, but there's a bunch
some
of other
rules
ones
that don't matter for us, like the fact like the spirit shaman just doesn't work in the dungeon.
All that spiritual shit, I was like,
it doesn't matter for us.
There was some interesting story aspects to it, but as I thought about it more, I'm like, this shit just doesn't matter for you guys to agree, and it's probably not going to come up with enough. Like, none of you detect evil or undead, so that doesn't matter. Though, like, the fact that, like, you're warned, it's overwhelming. That's about it, you know. I think, like, the unhollow, that's fine. It's unhollow.
That's a simple mechanic. That's just to get a plus something.
You know,
for their roll.
It's also, like, channel DCs are reduced by 4.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, okay, that's a standard number.
It's an easy thing to deal with.
It's an easy thing to do with. Yes, it nerfs the channel ability a little bit, but it technically would stack with channel resistance which lightning overcomes then, so it's sort of like,
Yeah.
hey, guess what? You're neutered a little bit. Not as much as it would have been for any other cleric. And I'm like, wow! But that's just on Hollow in general, and Hollow sucks.
Yeah.
But there was a whole bunch of other things that I'm like, yeah, no, I'm just... It could just be said in much more simpler terms. Like, I'm sorry. It's like 3 pages of this shit.
Yeah, this is kind of an issue when you have a spell for everything. You have to list it in terms of the spell that exists.
And I think technically this probably was a lot smaller in the original stuff because a lot of
They probably
interactions
expanded on this.
They had to, because it was like, I think it was the problem with this being like, I think because original Crimson Queen was very still much 3.5 coded. So when they redid it as an entire big book, they had to kind of bring it up Pathfinder. And we had this upgrade, and they had to upgrade the mechanics, meaning they had to relook at everything going on at that time. And they did do some interesting things. I realized there's a whole bunch of monsters in this book that are like Monster Manual 5 and stuff, and I'm like, wait a second. They wouldn't have been around during that time. They switched a bunch of monsters. I guess they found like more interesting monsters or
Maybe.
something? I don't know. So, or some of those stuff might have been monsters that were 3.5 monsters, D&D monsters, not Pathfinder monsters that they never printed. I kind of will look at the old books and kind of like figure that out a little bit, but still. But yeah, no. So yeah, let's. The entire thing was securing a base site and then securing the bridge, which,
Enough.
I think it was fine. I think it went fine.
I wasn't expecting that guy to be executed immediately, but that just happens when you have a scythe.
Yeah, the
You
barbarian guy.
Yeah, you just crit.
He just crit him and was like super killed that
It's
man.
150 damage. He died immediately.
I'm like,
He
yeah,
got
no. This guy just super died. I'm sorry. There was no coming back from
There's
that.
no way around that.
Yeah, that was so much damage with the scythe. It was an epic fight between them, and it was one round, but it was pretty epic, I think.
Fully prepared to have to kill everyone in that fortress.
I think the thing is, like, the problem is it was... I'm going to tell you, the book being an old book doesn't talk about diplomacy at all, but as soon as I read up on these guys, I'm like, there is technically a chance for it. There is a chance for it the more I read up on it, but I'm like, I understand why the book didn't want to give that at all, because they're just like, murder everything a lot.
Oh yeah, it's their experience points.
Yeah. So, like, it wasn't easy, but the way we played through it, I think went well. I don't think it went bad. And certainly speaking, like, it's the thing that, like, it's very hard because, I had to kind of think about how these guys would think. And, like, as soon as you murder their boss, they're like, you know what? We're just out. We're just out.
Cut down in one hit.
Yeah. It's like, these two guys
they're
beat the
orcs,
shit
but
out
they're
of
not. They're orcs, but they're not stupid.
And the thing is, the only one that had, like, will fight to the death was their leader. And they're like, the rest of them are like, well, as long as their leader was alive, they would probably push forward because they're like, if he's going to stab us, like, we don't do this.
Yeah.
But as soon as he died, they're like, we're just going to go now. Just going to go now. Bye. Have a good day. We're just going to go now. And then you secured the bridge, which, it's interesting because the guy has weird mechanics, because it is a type of mechanic that I don't think will ever come up again. But I also think they're not really, like, good mechanics to fight people with. He did a lot of damage, but, like, I probably could have been more of a dick with him. I just chose not to, gotta be honest.
He was a skeleton on a horse.
Yeah, he's just
Yeah,
a skeleton on a horse that
The
flies.
combat sucks.
Yeah, it's really mean to hit people, but it's not great when everybody's bunched up like that. I'm saying, like, mounted combat when people are bunched up isn't great.
Died to magic missile.
He did die to Magnus, which is hilarious.
Zapped in the face for 3 damage and died.
Like,
That was amusing.
it was
I like
so close to killing him that I was like, I think when River was talking about it, I was
do you
like,
have anything else? Any
it's like,
bonuses?
wait a second, I can do this other thing, and I'm like, just do a little extra damage. Just do a little extra damage. And then it was like, no, that's it. And I'm like, well, and then you're like, magic missile, and I'm like, what do you roll? Okay, because I think he rolled a 3, so it was like 4 damage, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I believe he had exactly like 4 health too. It was something like stupid like that. It wasn't 1, but it was goddamn close to it. And I'm like,
Threw his skull in the lake.
so fucking close. But yeah, so Scarwall is a mega dungeon, and as much as like already I've kind of busted on the way they've written the mechanics of it to make it complex. I understand that it's your 13th level, is it?
13th level. So it
It's
needs
a
to be
13th level
difficult.
dungeon, so it kind of needs to be a challenge in a lot of
It needs to be
ways.
difficult, but I think there's just too many layers of mechanics on it. Like you could remove probably like 3 of those mechanics and it would be fine.
The thing is, I understand why they said a lot of those mechanics.
I think the soul trapping stuff is fine because also like dying in Pathfinder kind of hard at this point.
Yeah. I
It's
think
really just like
the Unhollow's fine. I think Dimensional Anchor adds a lot of weirdness.
It's fine. It's just complicated and dumb.
Yeah, it's complicated and kind of dumb, and it's one of those things that like it. Unfortunately, Dimensional Anchor only mentions a few things and doesn't define a lot of stuff, and you have to dive into extra dimensionality as part of it, and I'm like, fuck me.
But it's like there's shit where it's just like, oh yeah, these classes, their core features probably won't work. What if you have players playing those classes? What are they gonna do?
Yeah, the spirit-based classes and stuff like that. Those are just like okay, the channel being reduced. Like I embellished it a little bit, but my embellishment for that was just a little bit of, because it was really just the Unhollow thing. I'm just like, hey, I just want to be nice and basically warn you when you're like, oh, you're about to fight a monster that technically kind of like is in a different way resistance to channels than normal just channel resistance, because I did see some monsters that had like things like, resistance to positive energy and stuff rather than resistance to saves, which is different. I could be like, I can say that you sense there's something more powerful, like your channel won't be as powerful in this area fighting this thing, rather than, hey, you have to make a knowledge check against it. Because it's something that might be relied upon because of the importance here that honestly will come up a lot, I think, in certain ways. I just kind of can't remember to say that. Anyway, so Mega Dungeons, they kind of come in, I think, 2 flavors. You have one that's Scarwall, which is like an adventure. Scarwall is honestly like 50 rooms. I think it really is sort of like that. There is a lot of rooms that don't have a lot to them, but I feel like this place at least has a decent amount that you can kind of call it lived in without random encounters and stuff like that. At very least, some of them have some story and stuff to them.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have something that's more like, honestly, like the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. That is a mega dungeon, but that is a campaign mega dungeon.
That is a whole book.
Yeah. Where it is, your entire campaign is based around it, and there's like fucking like 20 levels or something like that, which are like miniature dungeons. Like,
and
Scarwall's like I would say actually like only like 3 actual layers and 2 smaller layers,
Makes sense.
Maybe like Castle Ravenloft is comparable that way, kind of like, or not, Ravenloft. Is it Castle Ravenloft or is it,
Castle Ravenloft is a big dungeon.
It's a big dungeon at the end of Curse of Strahd.
Yeah.
I kind of could compare it to Starwall, in size a little bit, I think.
Unlike Starwall, Castle Ravenloft made by a joke by just playing Curse of Strahd and getting the items.
Yeah. I mean, I discussed it. I think some of the things that I'm not doing is if you actually wanted to fight the Chain Spirit, you could. I wouldn't make it unkillable, but I would probably keep the bonuses it gets for having its spirits changed, because technically speaking, according to the actual rules of the monster, as long as it has any of the chains, it just comes back right away. I wouldn't do that. I think we kind of discussed that. So it's you could fight it. It just gets stat boosts up the wazoo for having its spirits changed. So, you don't technically have to kill all of them. The more you kill, the weaker it is to actually kill. So I kind of nerfed that part of that there a little bit.
That's fine.
Yeah. But, what was I going to say? I do like a lot of aspects of Scarwall that's sort of the ancient spirits of a lot of the generals and important people that were under there have come back as undead in various ways with a couple other creatures that are here. It's kind of interesting. But, a mega dungeon, regardless if you're doing something Mad Mage or this one here, it's a lot of dungeon crawling. You're going to be stuck on dungeon crawling a lot. And there sometimes is opportunities for role-playing stuff, and I will say, having gone through a percentage of it, there are actually some opportunities for some role-playing stuff in here.
I'm going to say a good dungeon crawl has roleplay opportunity.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna just say that outright.
Yeah, certainly speaking, I've only gotten through a percentage of stuff there already for monsters. But I have seen some stuff that, there is some... you can encounter some non-undead things that are living here quotations that you might be able to deal with. And again, I doubt you'd make deals with the undead, but theoretically there would be some undead you could technically make deals with, but with your character.
Yeah,
there are 3 characters where you don't like undead. So, I feel talking to the undead is out of the question.
Yeah.
Because Zardus' religion hates undead, and there's 2 Pharasmites.
Yeah. I think the thing is, if someone is to run Crimson Queen, you definitely, can't have a I summon undead necromancer, and that's the thing is, I don't think you should have gotten to here with the classes that they mentioned, if you want to have it as a problem here.
Yeah, the
you should tell
classes
those
they mentioned are kind of rough for this
campaign.
Because,
the 2 they mentioned, and also the fact that, the place exhibits, has, or presses control over undead. That is a story element that's kind of neat, because, the way they talk about it, the place. But you should express that to people way beforehand, and it's sort of I didn't realize that to the degree until we got here. I'm not gonna lie. It's oh god, I really should know about these kind of things way ahead of time. You're not telling me?
Yeah, you kind of have to read the whole adventure when you start running Pathfinder adventures.
I think it's
or at least the summary.
Yeah, because again, I'm getting this at this is book 5 too of 6. So if I think about the people that played this back when it was originally published, they might have been punished. Granted, it's not necessarily
published. All those classes weren't out. To be fair,
I mean, a necromancer type character could have been in a group party. I think it wouldn't have. It's not logically a normal thing for this adventure, I feel but it could have been there, not outside the realm of possibility. The other 2 classes are super rare.
Yep.
So I think those would have been definitely newer stuff. But anyway,
Mega Dungeons.
Yeah. Getting sidetracked a little bit here. Yes, thank you. Running a mega dungeon is one of those things that you do actually have to have an idea about a lot of mechanics there, how it runs, what's your player's goal. Because certainly speaking, I think the idea of what constitutes a mega dungeon is a dungeon that is very, very large and will take up, maybe like a dozen to 24 or more battles,
I would define a mega dungeon as the dungeon is the core part of the campaign. Like, majority of your time will be spent in the dungeon. If the majority of your time in a single campaign will be in a dungeon, then that's a mega dungeon.
I think it could work for like one adventure two, one arc
of a campaign.
One arc of a campaign, which the arc could be the entire campaign. That's Mad Mage. But this one, it's all of book 5, really.
Yeah, pretty much. So all of one or more arcs are in a dungeon, then you're probably running a mega dungeon.
Yeah. There are plenty of smaller dungeons that, you have and stuff like that, and a lot of things. It's sort of like, I wouldn't call, though there's some similarities between this and Scarwall, Harrowstone from the original Carrying Crown, a mega dungeon. It is a big dungeon, but there's a lot of stuff that does involve around Harrowstone outside of it, a lot of story that's told outside of it. Granted, mechanically there are some things similar. It's a haunted place, you have to dive in, it's not a great place to rest in, there's all this other little, details about it that Scarwall's taken to, 11 for its undead nature and stuff like that. Fortunately, I'm going to tell you, there are some haunts here, but it's half a dozen at most. In 50
At this
rooms,
level, haunts are just kind of annoying.
Well, most of them
I have
are also...
no idea what a haunt means.
It's basically a supernatural trap, and most of them are associated with a battle. So it's sort of like the haunt hits you with something, and then a monster fights you.
You're right,
so
you're
In
right.
Carrion Crown, there was a haunt
those
that
in
I
Pathfinder,
remember
the rules for Pathfinder 2e.
where it was a will save, or you are compelled to jump inside of an Iron Maiden and lose half of your hit points until you complete a series of rests.
Yeah.
And that's a level 3 dungeon.
Yeah.
It was a little rough.
There were some pretty rough ones there. I don't think there's any particular, so far as I've seen, which again, as I've been diving deep, it's been going through monsters and then reading up exactly on these. Most of these tend to be it hits you with something that, does some damage or does a temporary, thing to you before you battle the creature, So, none have felt particularly this murders you. Ah, man, something horrible happened here with, I'm just, it'd be this is the place where they dipped people in acid to torment them. There's an explosion of acid, and then, acid monsters show up. That doesn't happen. But that's just what I, thought of. Something like that, or acid ghosts or something, that kind of stuff that happens, which, it's annoying, but it's, thematically it works that, this is, part of them, and I feel like it's a little better than, certainly Harrowstone in a lot of ways.
Yeah, Harrowstone had a lot of, CR1 or CR1 4 haunts.
I think the thing is,
some higher CR1s.
With haunts, it's like traps. They're good in moderation, so having a few traps or haunts throughout a dungeon isn't necessarily bad. It's not. You don't want a lot of them, You don't want Trapfest 2000. And that definitely applies to a mega dungeon where you're going through a lot of rooms. Plus also having some rooms that there really isn't a lot to isn't necessarily bad. Or maybe a place that might have...
A room is not going to... in my opinion, and this doesn't apply to Scarl because there's a specific mechanic for being you can't rest in this dungeon, fuck you. If you're doing a big campaign mega dungeon, you should strategically put rooms where your players can rest.
I think that's why they station it that they want you to use the barbican, technically. That's the kind of way they present it. Because again, I presented the way that they're there's these horrible monsters in the moat and things fly in the air, and it's not a pleasant area to live in, generally speaking, this area of the mountains. And they're well, the bridge is probably the easiest way in. And they're well, then you're coming in and out, and you can rest outside. But also, that's another reason why I'm just you just use Magnificent Mansion if you want. Because it's extra steps that if you didn't have Magnificent Mansion, would be more understandable than you having mangoes
Yeah.
in it. You know,
Like, the issue with the bridge walk is, and I think I know why they do it. So I remember, because it's a dungeon, so it probably has a table of wandering monsters. That's why they want you to walk back and forth. You roll on the table, it gives you XP, so you can get to the level to beat the dungeon.
and again, like,
That's the logic of it.
like, I think the great thing about the book here is that they do provide extra information for this mega dungeon, that they're like, hey, if you don't want to use random encounters, you don't have to. They actually do give the rules on, like, they do talk about, like, that's why, like, I talked about you about doing, like, the lesser chain spirit, because they're like, hey, this, like, these are the things that you can do to make this easier, if you want to. And they listed off a whole bunch of different things you could do with the chain spirit. They talk about, like, not using random encounters at all. You know, granted, like, I think I will pretty much not use random encounters, which their random encounter chart actually wasn't that big. I'm going to tell you, there's a couple of monsters that are in certain rooms that could be wandering around, and then also a couple of, like, other things which could exist. Like, there's like 2 classifications of monsters that could actually be random, and I'm like, I just don't need to do that. There's, like, some, like, type of soldier, and also, like, I'm not gonna lie, unless you do some shit, you're probably not gonna fight the other thing, because it's, like, the walls are, like, super possessed by, like, incorporeal undead that are, like, souls in the walls that, normally can kind of get free. But I'm also like, if you go around smashing walls, that might have them, like, pop out. You're like, I smashed a wall. Guess what? Some wraiths pop out or something because they were trapped in there. You know, it's that kind of thing. I might do that at most, but you guys don't really smash a lot of things anyway, so it's not really going to come up. Much.
So I'm gonna do something that might be a little something that might be a little controversial, but
Okay.
I think if you're running a mega dungeon, you should use random encounters.
I agree in a non-stream game.
I think
I
that's...
agree. So here's the thing. I was gonna say exactly that, but for the streamline purposes of our game, I agree with your decision not to. But
that was the thing is, I actually do really like all the ones they suggest. You know, it does add extra tension. Like, and the thing is, they do mention for the random encounters is really you shouldn't just roll them all the time. You should use it to break up if your characters are exploring an area with not a lot, that something happens. They do actually tell you to use them strategically to break tension or to break, you know, like monotony and like stuff like that a lot, which was a really awesome suggestion or way of doing it. And I think that's the thing is, that might be also the thing. I agree with you, but I also think using them smartly. Like, if you're getting a lot of fights anyway, you really don't need random encounters. Or like you mentioned, going back to rest, I'm gonna not lie. Unless characters are, like, going back to rest after every fight, probably not gonna do that.
Thing is, the logic would be of having them on the way back would be if you spend an extended amount of time in, things are logically may wander back to those rooms that are cleared, like, well, I can go in here now, something's not going to kill me. Right?
Yeah. Things kind of can move into areas you cleared out.
Yeah, and my thought, too, is just that it's meant to... I like the idea of random encounters because they're designed to basically prevent players from taking the 5-minute adventuring day. It's really what you're meant to use random encounters to prevent.
I agree. It's the natural punishment to characters that are being wusses.
Yep.
I'm not gonna lie. It's the non-punishing punishment, I guess you could call it, because it's not meant to be super much of a punishment. It's just meant to be a little bit of an extra thing of like,
It's meant to be, you can stop here, but you might get attacked. And like a good GM will actually never, if they're really low on resources, will not trigger a random encounter. Like, you don't don't do that, but it's like, you know, if they want to take some time to rest and they're like only at half resources and not completely gone, you know, yeah, you can, but there's a chance. You know,
you are not beholden on the rolls of random chance unless you want to be.
Yep.
So yeah, keep that in mind. But yeah, definitely random encounters to help break the tension, to help, keep things going, to ensure players are actually,
to ratchet
exploring.
up the tension, not just break tension.
Ratchet up the tension, break monotony, ratchet up the tension when needed. They're a good tool. It's just like everything is a tool. Like having a couple of traps here, or like in this case, traps. I think there might be a couple of traps, a couple of haunts and stuff like that, set up throughout the dungeon. These kind of things are stuff that are sort of like, oh, there's more threats than just that. And there actually are some other things that do occur in here that will help break the tension that don't actually affect you. They actually have rules in the game, in the adventure, which I think is really cool for, like, this place is really haunted. Sometimes those haunted effects can't actually harm you. But stuff that's really spooky and haunted can actually happen. They actually have rules for that in some of the places you go to. So it's like, shit, what the fuck was that? Is it something bad? And you're like, oh, no, it wasn't. It was just like, the spirits are, like, lashing out because this place is horribly haunted. And I thought, I'm like, that's really cool. And it's something that does help with all of that. And it doesn't also just, like, they don't have to all be, like, Iron Maidens that ream you in the ass. It can just be some spooky shit happens,
Yeah. But basically, there's a point where, when you can cast something like, Magnificent Mansion, then random encounters are kind of pointless at that point.
Yeah.
But they're great. They're great for early encounters. They're great for keeping people on their toes.
It's kind of the point of the level we're at. A random encounter would probably, at least for a stream game, would just take up time.
Yeah. I think it's also that thing, too, is if I was not in a stream game necessarily, I probably would be very much more on the side of being very exact Dimension Anchor, because it would help with the, we're going through a mega dungeon. But again, also, like, I feel like it was a good thing for them to discuss with this deeply. The sheer fact is, you don't necessarily want to, like, overwhelm your characters with a mega dungeon, too, sometimes. I think it's one of those things that good mega dungeons have that release. I'm not sure on Mad Mage, off the top of my head, I didn't read into it depths, but, like, I played through another mega dungeon that's very similar to that Pathfinder made, first edition published. Emerald Spire. I played through Emerald Spire. I played through all of Emerald Spire. And Emerald Spire is set up in such a way that you go in and explore, it's like 13 levels, and you really only have access to the first level. But as you go down, you discover ways to access the other levels. There's like, the Spire has like a teleportation mechanic. So as long as you have these items you find within it, you can teleport back to like the first level. Where it's pretty well secured. There's not a lot of monsters wandering in. There's like a town nearby. So like not a lot of dangers are on the first floor. And probably not a lot of stuff's going to move in. But the other floors are connected to things like the Darklands and other places. You might encounter stuff. So like, so there is this like level of like danger there. But it does give you these times to go break. And like, you find people that are asking you, like, to go to do certain things at different floors. So they basically give you side quests to the main quest of exploring the place. But those side quests add for moments where you can kind of roleplay and discuss and, like, talk with these people and, like, learn what they want, what kind of help they need, and stuff like that. And I think that helps break the tension of that place a lot of ways. And honestly, most of the time, you're not really revisiting most of those floors, so you're probably not going to worry about monsters wandering back in there. But, like, it's also, like, usually when you're going into a floor, you teleport into one spot, and you have to use the crystal that's going through, like, the Emerald Spire that's going through the entire thing to leave, so you still have to adventure to the Emerald Spire before you could theoretically withdraw. So we're like, there's these levels of stuff, and I think you also, there's a lot of stuff to it that's really neat about the way it works that I thought was really fun. Yeah. Mechanically, they added a lot of stuff. They ensured that motorcycle. I felt it was a very well built. But of course, also Emerald Spire came out very late in the Pathfinder first edition kind of thing.
I believe the Under Mountain, which is the Mad Mage dungeon, a lot of the floors do just have ways to connect back to the surface, so you can leave at your leisure and go back.
Yeah.
So obviously, floor 1, connected to the awning portal and then summoned to the sewers of whatever the city is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you want ways for people to retreat and rest and do stuff. The idea is just more, yeah, so. Yeah, but I think Mega Dungeons, yeah, you should have plenty of stuff. It should still be a story. There should be lots of, I think there should even be some stuff that make no sense, you know, like maybe some almost red herring rooms where it's like, there's nothing actually here.
Well, it's the thing, like, there's, like, it's that kind of thing of, like, you know, hey, you all guys are, you folks know, we have to find, basically, powerful named spirits. Just because you find one doesn't mean it's the one you're targeting. Yeah. It's the same kind of thing. It's like, you have to find certain things. Just because you go to this one area doesn't mean you're finding, like, the correct thing. You have to kind of explore, you kind of have to learn, you have to kind of determine these different things. I think that's another thing about Dungeon Crawl. Yes, it's usually a lot of fights, there's a lot of things you encounter, but it is a very exploration-heavy thing. It's just like a compact exploration. It's not like an above-ground exploration, you know. So, it should have a good mixture of you exploring and finding rooms, maybe finding some treasure, versus all the fights you have. You want that kind of, I think, balance between the two of them that makes it work a little bit better for a Mega Dungeon. Because it's the same as, you know, role-playing breaks the tension, or, like, you know, adds a level of stuff, or, like, we're talking about the random encounters that can, you know, break apart times that are, like, down times or boredom, or add to tension, you know, in various ways. You know, you kind of are also looking and having that addition of brain work. I was saying the words and I lost it. Exploration. You know, that's the kind of sense of discovery and learning stuff. You know,
yeah,
bits and pieces of the story of the place, or things that, you know, maybe tell it directly or indirectly would be good. You know, they might not find everything out about this monster in this room that has this thing, but pieces of that would be neat for them to learn. You know, why is the statue here? What does it mean? You know, that kind of stuff. You know, allow them to, like, you know, oh, there's some writing on it. What do I know about that? You know, oh, that's an interesting thing to be here. We can kind of explore that, because that's very weird.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, honestly, I think it's good to just have, like, yeah, just tell the story of the place through the environment. It's kind of hard to do in RPGs because you have to describe a lot and people have to ask questions. Players never ask questions. They'll get stuck on a wall that means nothing, but then the carefully planned thing that tells them everything they'll ignore.
It's the unfortunate thing that, like, it does end up the same way that, like, in a lot of, like, when you're running a game, you have to, like, have contingencies for preparing the information players need. So it can't be just one check. It can't be just one thing. You know, it's like, oh, if they fail this check, maybe there's a note on this guy. Or maybe if they fail this check, there's, like, a box with, like, some letters that can be found nearby hidden. Or something like that,
all villains keep their top secret plans in a glove bag of holding on their person when you kill them.
I like the traditional, like, they were writing a letter to someone that was also evil and villainous that they were working with. Which, honestly speaking, I think actually was, like, 2 adventure hooks from Rise of the Rune Lords, were literally, like, the main villain of one thing had written a letter to another one. Nice. Of, like, the next adventure, and I was like, that is where we should go next to continue our investigation. I think I actually pulled that, like, at least once. I do, as soon as we mentioned it, it made me think of that, which is hilarious. But certainly a lot of that kind of stuff you don't necessarily need, but I think it also comes down to sometimes the problem with a mega dungeon can be how is it structured, and where will your players go in it? Because it's a big place with a lot of places to explore.
Yeah, and there's a big thing where, and I think one of the biggest, and this is why I've always wanted to run or play in a mega dungeon. I haven't before, by the way. I have lots of thoughts on it, but I've never actually done it. And that's why I've always wanted to do it, because my favorite thing in these kind of games is exploring. I'd love to do just a survival, open world game where I could just be, it's like, here's a map, where do you want to go, what do you want to do? I'd love to play a game like that.
Well, games are possible, they just take a lot of work to set up.
Some. I agree.
Yeah, I agree. There can be some, like, flexibility, because, like, it certainly could be something like, I would have a map, and there might be certain places you know about, and then places you don't know about, and exploring in that direction, you discover something, and then it could just be me, like, honestly taking from a table of some places that I want to use, or, like, either choosing one randomly, or, like, I plan for you to encounter this place, which if you went to, like, random directions to try to find a random thing, this is what I was planning for you to find, that kind of thing, too. So it has that appearance of a lot of open world, but, DMs hide that kind of thing. Unless you want to spend all the time actually planning out everything, which you can do.
Yes, I mean, I do think it takes a lot more, but in a way, Mega Dungeons are kind of, honestly, a version of that. Where your entire group thing is planned out generally ahead of time. That's the one thing, if I remember correctly, there was in the first edition, original Gary Gygax's recommendation was make six levels of your dungeon before you start,
Gary, I'm just gonna say that. Look, I'm not gonna lie. It's like the thing of, like, there is sometimes, like, structure can be better. Like, I'm gonna tell you, one of the reasons that I think I would point to with better confidence places like the Emerald Spire or Dungeon of the Mad Mage, because they are more structured in a way than Scarwalls. Granted, Scarwall is, like, the smallest level of a mega dungeon, I would call it. It is a one-arc adventure dungeon, while, like, Emerald Spire I would call, like, a 2 or 3 arc one, and, like, Mad Mage is, like, a 5 arc, because you're supposed to be taking it from, like, 4th level to 20th. So it's that, like, 5 arc blade, and Emerald Spire is just, like, 13 levels, so it's, like, maybe, like, 3 arcs kind of, like, worth. But each, like, those have, like, levels. Each level is its own, like, dungeon connected to the main thing, where you explore one at a time for a lot of those. Scarwall, unless you choose to go one at a time, you don't really go one at a time, because it's, like, it's technically just 2 floors. Really.
Yeah.
There's, like, a upper floor area for, like, towers and stuff like that. And there is kind of, like, a basement-y area, but that's one that you have to find access to, which I'm just going to say is going to be much later on in the adventure. It's really just, like, those 2 first and second floors that you're really going to be exploring mostly,
Yeah.
And going in the main door puts you in a certain spot, yeah. But you really have yours is the oyster for exploring it in that way for a little bit, which means it's like, unless I do something to push you that, I mean, like, I guess the player, which is a very normal player thing of, like, I loved exploring one entire level of things, makes it a little easier sometimes. It's like, let's just secure this level first.
That's just a tactical thing to do.
It is a common attitude and a very tactical thing to do, and it makes sense. And I think that's one of the reasons that it can help a lot of ways too. That you kind of can plan out a little bit, but it's not always a guarantee. It's one of those things too, And so, and the place doesn't have that restriction in this dungeon at least. And I think that's sort of like, that's just a design of a mega dungeon, like how you design it too. Like, is it just one big place that you can go really anywhere in? Is it a couple of floors you go one at a time in? How is your mega dungeon structured? Will make a difference on how it is played through. Like,
yep.
Emerald Spire, Mad Mage, they are in fact quite linear, adventures technically. You go from one level to the next, exploring down. Scarwall, though it is only one spot, is technically non-linear, I would say. It is restricted to one place, but you can go wherever you want. In the entire place, technically. There's some restrictions, but they're mild restrictions, they're like story restrictions kind of things that, you can come back to.
Yeah, but the hard part about running a mega dungeon is you really do have to prepare a good chunk of it in advance. It's probably the hardest part about preparing a mega dungeon.
Yes. If you think about it, I had to have, for what we did, 5 monster sheets already I've used. And certainly a bunch of them I won't reuse, They use them for one thing. And I'm not gonna lie, I think except for... No, actually none of them. No, the Skeletal Champion. The Skeletal Champion was the only monster that was drag and drop out of those. Because Skeletal Nightmare isn't in the, isn't in the normal, information on the site, and all the other creatures were just, the orcs were just orcs with levels, and the Skeletal Warrior was unique, and as I said, the Nightmare, they don't have those stats in the thing. It was just a unique undead. Yes, it's just a Nightmare that's a skeleton, but...
Which is kind of funny, because that's actually they have a monster stat block in 2e for that. In the monster.
I think technically the Skeletal Nightmare was actually technically using the rules for a Skeletal Champion, so it was intelligent. Because Skeletal Champions they've got int stats, That's the difference between them and normal skeletons. So all of them technically had int stats, but, the guy in charge actually was a Dread Skeleton, which I don't know the difference between Dread Skeleton and anyone else. I think they have commanding undead abilities, which is why he's their commander, which is kind of neat. But I'm not gonna lie, as soon as I'm God, these guys are if given the opportunities and they don't move first, I knew they were all gonna be nuked. I was ready for that.
Yes, and that's where I'm like, man, they really did need to, I'm probably the only person who couldn't nuke them.
I thought about spreading them out a little bit, but I'm also they're a military. They're not going to spread
I'm going to be 100% honest with you, Tantus. There was no actual way that those skeletons weren't going to die because I was just going to wall of fire them. I would have just ran a wall of fire 200 feet down the bridge.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Yes, what he said, but also, I would say you can spread them out a bit. I mean, yes, there's rank and file, but then there's rank and file in a fantasy universe.
Well, they're in formation, I assume.
They were marching up in formation,
Yeah, but my point is that you can have a more spread out rank and file if you need to for reasons. Rank and file is actually a thing where it's yes, they're in a grid.
I think if I kept them in rows of 4, but had them 5 feet apart, that might have been a little better. But I still think that area still would have been nuked very... The thing is, Fireball's a big area.
I agree that they would have been nuked almost no matter what, but...
One or two might have survived.
Slightly harder. Yeah.
They're only CR2, though, so it's sort of I think 1 or 2 actually. They're 17 hit points. That's why
okay, never mind. Nothing would have survived. They would have survived nothing. A
fireball that's the thing is, that's why I didn't even roll their saves, because I'm half damage is more hit points than they have.
Yeah, and I knew that, but I'm okay, so because he rolled 48, I'm that was a pretty good roll, and I'm okay, so they probably have 24 health. I'm yeah, they could have survived if they, they have at most 28 or 24 health, and I'm yeah, I could see them doing something. But then it's oh no, 17, yeah, no, nothing.
Skeleton champions are tough in comparison to a normal skeleton, but not by a lot. They're
oh yeah, you're talking about a CR 0 versus a CR 2.
Sorry, 1/2 that they've got. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, I've been playing. I've been reading Pathfinder 2e rules where it's -1 to.
I mean, unless you actually you can make them more difficult by giving them better equipment and stuff like that. But these guys. But yeah,
Yep.
I think it's the thing then too when we talk about that kind of thing is the environment you're setting up for all your encounters. I think that matters much even deeper for something like a mega dungeon, because in a lot of smaller dungeons, especially a lot of them that you can play through, you aren't telling a lot of stories about the various rooms and the things that are in them. But a mega dungeon, remember, you're already telling a big story. So, it matters a lot more thematically what you're playing. And again, there is some flexibility thematically. It is an undead dungeon. Well, there's some other aspects of it. It was a place that, people that were worshippers of Zon Kuthan came from. So, there's an entire list of, there's other things that serve Zon Kuthan. Maybe one of them's around. Maybe, there's an area where, some monsters that are okay with negative energy, or, unhallowedness wandered in. Because there are some, things things that would be, under dungeoneering, or, the planes, or, even well, probably not nature, but, arcana for, some magical beasts that might be fine in this area. Sort of I mentioned the group of gargoyles that took the tower. They're fine here. They are managed to integrating with this place. And the undead, leave them alone because they help guard the skies. It's sort of that's another thing. It's sort of yeah, there's some flying undead. They leave the gargoyles alone because they've integrated with them. So those are monstrous humanoids, That's something that you know about. That's there. That's not undead. And sort of there's a reason behind it because, they probably made some kind of deal with the masters of this place, the chain spirit and stuff, and managed to work something out that they can live there, successfully and stuff like that. And there are these levels of story that you do have to kind of develop. And certainly speaking, it doesn't mean you can't just have there's a monster here, but the more times you do that, the more times you walk around for a theme or story of where you're exploring, and logically speaking, yes, we're talking fantasy, but there's only so many times your players can go, what the hell is this leap of logic? Before it gets a little too much.
I mean, I think one of the ones, if you really want a variety of creatures, one of the more fun ways you could do that is monster wars. So you've got groups of monsters that are warring with each other.
Yeah. That's
so
really
it's there are beholders warring with an army of behirs or dragons or something,
I would have done that in any edition but 5th, because 5th edition they did interesting but weird things to beholders, not gonna lie.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the beholder stat block in 5e, I think, ever, so...
They're much higher CR than they were in other editions.
Oh, okay.
I mean, by much higher, I mean they jumped them up by 3 or 4 CR.
Yeah.
But they also they also changed their origins to be something that kind of is both interesting and weird, because they made them dream monsters, which never existed in any other edition till 5th.
Huh.
Yeah. That was, something 5th edition made up. And I'm okay, sure. Basically, I really loved beholders and loved using them in a lot of games, and the way that they presented them, I'm it's thematically the same monster. No, it's physically the same monster. Thematically, you've done something completely different with them. I can't really use them the way I used them before. Not that I wouldn't use them, but again, it's a complete difference between, honestly, any of the other editions from 1st to 4th. I don't know. 5th edition's done a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really so much that they dream creatures so much as,
well, they dream of more of them. They dream up more of them, and that creates more of them.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
They just actually created more of them through non-magical means. They just they don't self-replicate, they self-breed themselves in older editions.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little weirder.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of cool. I mean...
Well, there was a
Like,
lot more types of beholders. Like, there was, like, a couple dozen, like 2 dozen different types of beholders and stuff like that.
I mean, yeah, there's only
and most
3
of them
in the core book.
And most of them don't really work anymore either. Like, I don't know how you could do Elder Orbs, Beholder Mages, or Hive Mothers anymore. And the thing is, like, they also didn't really hint at it, but there was an entire, like, storyline of, like, in Spelljammer, Beholders were an enemy in Spelljammer that had their own types of spelljamming ships. I don't think they mentioned those or could mention those because they rewrote them in such a way that they don't work in Spelljammer anymore.
I mean, I think they're fine. Like,
well, I think they're fine too.
Yeah,
actually, but I think it's a different type of creature. I think is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know. I still don't know much about beholders. Like, I remember what you're talking about now when I read it. It's more like they can't, and it made it more sound like they. If I remember, like based on what I just was looking at, it made it more sound like they have powerful like imaginations and what they think can become reality, so they can create more of themselves through dreaming, basically.
But that's supposed to be the way they kind of are created. While like 3rd edition, 2nd edition actually have like a lot more statistics and stuff like that. Just what it was.
Yeah, but I think Mega Dungeons are fun. I think they're I think they're kind of forgotten, and I'd love to play in more.
I do agree because, unfortunately, I feel like it's not that it isn't become. I think in ways it's become harder, in certain ways. Not all the same ways, but in certain ways it has become a little bit more challenging to do things like Mega Dungeons because of the nature of a lot of the ways that our game editions have evolved. The Mega Dungeon does harken back to a lot of old things for, like, you know, it's a little bit more tougher, it's a little bit more brutal, it's a little bit more, like, straight up, like, a lot of combat, a lot, like, you know,
the
we
bigger
are
thing
focusing...
is more the amount of combat. There are far fewer people, I mean, there are still plenty of people who love high combat games, I am one of them, but I also am someone who really likes story-driven games, too, so I would hate a Mega Dungeon that's all combat and no story, but I'm totally down with one that's, like, 70% combat and 30% story. I'd be down with that.
Yeah, I think it's the thing, too, is that, like, it does... A lot of times Mega Dungeons, you know, unless the story is specifically written in a way that does add in that like, sense of adventure and you know, role-playing elements, it is more reliant on the DM to put them together. For the pure, you know, for the published ones. God, English, please work. I think for the ones that you would create on your own, that is a thing that you do have to consider. You know, it's easy to come up with a very large dungeon. I've done it before. I have created Mega Dungeons before on my own.
Same.
They're often, like, I have to tell you, I had a very interesting one that I liked a lot of parts of. I'm going to tell you, it did not end up well when I ran it. Unfortunately.
The one I ran ended up pretty good, I would say. But I'll let you finish what you're saying before I go into mine.
I was just going to say the last one I did not end up well. That I wrote.
Mm-hmm. The one I wrote ended pretty well, I think, because they had the players had a clear goal of where they had to go, or what they wanted out of it. So that's the thing. They knew what they wanted, but they didn't know where to go. So that was my big thing. Is more like there was a lot to explore, but you didn't know where you needed to go. And by the way, I was running a sci-fi game, but it was basically just like a weird experimental facility that experimented with like psionics and things beyond comprehension and extra-dimensional creatures. So this is a sci-fi game. So it was almost like, as I kind of chopped it up, to an SCP facility, basically. And I think it went really well. They lost some people. They came in with like more people. They lost some people. But honestly, they only lost like 2, which is actually pretty surprising to me. to be fair, one of the players is someone who's all like, if we lose one person, that's a loss. And I'm like, well, he made sure it didn't happen. So, but yeah, so it was pretty fun. And there was like one area that was extra dangerous, and they knew about that. But then there were obviously things roaming the whole abandoned facility. There was one area that was a lot less bad, which was more of the residential area, and it was very much them just looking for clues until they find the spot they needed, and then got out with what they wanted. So it wasn't like it took like, it was honestly an arc, I would say, which is why I would consider it a mega dungeon. But overall, it was still only like 5 games because they had a clear goal. But I'd consider it a mega dungeon because it was a giant dungeon.
Your Traveler game. When we were doing that game, the spaceship area where we were looking for the bugs and stuff and going deep in there, that I would consider a mega dungeon. Now, granted, we had a space to go to. We weren't technically there to explore that mega dungeon, but because there was the option of it and it existed in the format of a gigantic dungeon, it really was a mega dungeon. It was an interesting one because we were just visiting it, really. Rather than fully exploring.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You can tell my fascination with mega dungeons because I kind of hint to them everywhere, but I don't use them all that much. In part because I haven't played with people who would really like it, and I know that. Like, I don't think you guys would have liked to just go in, explore, and find things and clear things out. I don't think that group would have liked that.
I think I would have been fine with it because my character was very neutral about stuff. It's sort of like my character, again, for folks that are like, unaware, my character was just really like, on the very much self-discovery kind of adventure for like this kind of thing. Like the storyline of it was like I lost my like lifetime job, which I was assuming I would be in for my entire life, and I just like. And then I just got stopped in like a terrorist activity, like lost a limb, and then I like got a new one, and it was like, what the hell did I do now? And I these people that helped me out, like I guess I'll hang out with them, and they're like, hey, we got a ship, we need someone to pilot, and I'm like, I'm a pilot, I guess I'll go with you guys, sort of like so I was really just like on a new life path all of a sudden, it was an interesting story, but my character would definitely be like, I guess we're just exploring this place now. I know I would feel that way, so I would have definitely been up for it. But yeah, I can see us as an overall group maybe not being up for it,
Yeah, and it wasn't how I presented the game initially, but like you can tell that I really love the idea of like these really big dungeons, even though I really want to run one where it's kind of like that, but it's like episodic, almost, or where it's like there's something even bigger, but there are smaller mega dungeons within the bigger mega dungeon. That's something I want to do at some point. I'd love to do that. Like, it'd be so much work, but I mean, you saw those maps I made. They were big, and you guys didn't even use all of them. And I was just like, why did I put so much effort into this? I just like maps, so that's part of why.
I mean, that's the other thing too. Is you in a way gave us the option, and I think that's a good thing too.
Yes.
I think now in that case, we were still exploring part of it, and we were involved in it. But even like the idea of like story-wise, giving the option of a mega dungeon as part of your adventure could be something if you wanted to present it, you could. Like I could, fish out whether or not my players would like that kind of thing. And then I could possibly present that as the place the final boss is. Is it necessarily there? No, yes, maybe. But I can kind of present this kind of thing, I think, as an option. I think it's just a matter of presenting it, building, and all that kind of stuff. It isn't always easy. You're just figuring out how you want to present it, too.
Yeah. Honestly, I really do like. It's so funny because like now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I always have some weird mega structure in my games, always, that players can go into. No one's ever taken the bait, but I always include them.
I think it's also a thing that like, it's that there is a type of people that kind of really like that. It's kind of like for me, like, when I'm playing things like Civ 6 or Stellaris, like Civ 6, I love building wonders, if I have a chance to. I'm a little more practical now. But, because that one's like a race to it, and I'm like, well, if I can get to it, I can get to it. But, that was a little more difficult. But Stellaris, you show me some mega structures I'm going to build. I like a good mega structure. I'm kind of a fan of a good mega dungeon. I'm not going to lie. I like a lot of exploring and stuff, and the combat lives. I definitely enjoyed a lot more when we get those story elements, so we can tell a little bit of the story. Even if it's not, like, necessarily a personal story, because I feel like, yes, adding characters' personal stories is great, but you don't always need to. Like, when I did Emerald Spire, did I get into my character's story a lot? No, but I had a good time, and I enjoyed getting involved in the story that was there. Granted, my character started out kind of as half a joke, and then became serious later. Cough, cough, I was a merfolk. Cough, cough.
Yeah.
I was a merfolk in a dungeon. There's rules for that. And the silliest thing is, in Emerald Spire, one of the floors was flooded. All of a sudden, Merfolk King.
Yep.
Look, and the character, I played the character serious. It was a silly character that I played serious, which I've done before too. Like you can come with a very silly concept and then play it very seriously. And it worked in the dungeon there, honestly speaking, if it was very silly, because honestly, I was just a cleric. It didn't really matter as a merfolk. I had some backstory as to why I was there. It was an interesting one. It never came up. But the story there was very interesting, the exploration was so interesting, and, I had a very good time. And that's the kind of thing with Mega Dungeons, is you can engage the characters as much as you want, but you also do have to kind of realize who you're playing with a lot of times when you're doing these kind of things. They have to be ready. And I think that's the time to think about, like, I talked with everybody very deeply about Scarwall before we even got to it. That's why I had to make sure, what we were ready for, what we wanted to do, that kind of thing.
And I think that's a good thing, and I was very much mega dungeon. Like, I was like, come on, let's do it. I think you even cut it back more than I would have liked, but it's fine.
Overall,
but I get
it's
it.
not
I
huge
totally
cutbacks.
get it, especially for the purpose of a stream. I get it.
I think, again, the big thing was just taking a step away from all the random encounters, because they're neat, but again, I feel like most of them are not really needed 100%, and I think that's why I took a step back there a lot.
Yeah.
Hey, the wandering, like, soldier-type enemies that are, like, in there. I don't have to have extras of those. I can just have you fight them in the rooms that they're at.
Yeah,
stuff like that.
To be fair, though, I do think there's a fun idea of, like, instead of adding random encounters, just have a moving encounter. So, like, if, instead of it random, it's just if you guys happen, it can still be random, but it's like, oh no, these two people were moving from this room to this room. That's who you ran into, So, like, you actually clear out a room, but it's also, random encounter.
I mean, that's also, like, a good type of encounter, too, if you don't want to go full random encounter. That is a different type of encounter you can add in to make a Mega Dungeon more organic. That, like, creatures and things there have set schedules, so you might not encounter them in the same place at a time. They maybe have a home, but they maybe wander about. And, you could give a percentage chance, like, when someone's entering the area, where are they at? And depending on how much time goes by, where would they move to? And that kind of thing. It is a little bit more work for you as the GM, DM, whoever's running the game. But it's not a bad idea necessarily, because it does add some dynamic to these places that makes them feel a little bit more alive. And honestly speaking, that is a good way of doing it, that you don't have to have things like random encounters, but you kind of do, because it's an encounter you're going to have.
Yep.
Where it takes place. Jesus.
Yeah, in fact, I would say that if you do a Mega Dungeon, it's probably a good idea to have some kind of moving component, even if it's not like major. You can just basically, like, these two are warring, so I'll have this point where these two people are warring, like, where these two groups are warring when you walk up to them, when you approach this room, you'll find two groups warring, and that's just what you'll find, so some dynamic and stuff is a good idea.
No, dynamic's not a bad idea. It can add some interesting stories. Like, I think that kind of stuff I've used before, and it's a very fun thing to do, to kind of, like, add that your characters could theoretically be a third party to a conflict. Or maybe, they run into it, and these two, like, it could be something like I think Pathfinder Kingmaker did that there's like this conflict between these two groups that you could kill both of them, or you could negotiate peace between them and peace between you too. You can do that kind of thing. I think I went for a accidentally siding with one side or something, but it was an interesting storyline that was in an area, and certainly speaking of Mega Dungeons, is a great place for that kind of thing, because there's a lot of space for the storytelling, and a lot of chances to show, don't tell. I guess the other thing too. I think that's a big component of like a Mega Dungeon is something that's showing a lot more than telling. Have we mumbled on enough, do you think?
Probably.
I think I've mumbled on enough about this. You have anything else to add, Momo?
Not really.
I think we kind of hit on a lot of the points about a Mega Dungeon. I gave a couple examples of some ones if you want to look at ones that are published for yourself, or if you want to kind of run yourself. All right.
Yeah.
I guess that's it for today. Hey, woo! Thank you, both of you, for joining. Thank you, Worm. You giving me a shout out?
Yeah, I'm DiamondWyrm. You can find me on twitch.tv/DiamondWyrm or at DiamondWyrm on Twitter. I'll be streaming tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. PDT.
Cool. Well, I didn't spell that right. There we go. No, well, there we go.
Want me to shout out myself?
No, I think I probably put I just think I misspelled something accidentally and I didn't notice it for the first time. And thank you, for popping in, Momo. Certainly, it was good to have your kind of insight when we got it. A new person in charge of Wizards of the Coast.
We'll see what happens.
Again, I think for that one, I'm going to be like, well, I'm not really expecting a lot,
Yeah, and it's like, I'm not expecting a lot. I'm happy we got some of the better parts of Blizzard, but the problem is we got parts of Blizzard.
It's sort of like, we got rid of someone from the video game industry. What did we get back? Someone from the video game industry. Okay. How well did that go last time? Not well. So, you learned a lesson? Nope. Okay. Well, that's how it goes. Alright, everybody. Thank you once again to my co-host for joining me, and everybody out there, I hope you have a great rest of your day, whether it's joining us live on Saturday or later on YouTube, etc., and hope to see you in the future for this show and other stuff. For my schedule, I'll be back to a normal schedule next week, which means tabletop on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, some gaming on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, Crimson Queen on Wednesday night, and discussing tabletop next Saturday. So, normal schedule next week. Come and join me. Check me out. Should be live on probably be another Elden Ring week, because I never rolled what a new randomizer would be, so let's start with randomizer next week. We'll figure something out. Alright, bye everybody. Farewell.